Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Now, in today's video we're going to be talking about Battlegrounds victory track for season 21. Now this is the first time ever we actually get to play off season, and I have done so. I have played plenty of Gladiator Circuit and victory track, and that means that this time around I'm not just kind of predicting what is going to work, even though there is a bit of that as well. This time we have already some concrete results of champions that do not work, champions that do work for both Gladiator Circuit and victory track. It is easier to test in victory track because that's where the random matchmaker is set in off season, but if you play friendlies you can also play Gladiator Circuit meta. And yet again, something that's quite unique and rare for Battlegrounds is happening this season, where effectively the victory track meta is legitimately harder than the Gladiator Circuit meta, which kind of seems slightly backwards, definitely not the norm. And that obviously has to do with the fact that it is a power snack meta, which means that, you know, your buff gain gets invalidated and opponents get more power, which means pretty much an entire class by default is significantly disadvantaged. And here I'm talking mainly about Cosmic class, but lots of tech champions do not work as well, and a handful of other. Science champions get a boost in the victory track. So science stackers gain immunity to nullify. Whenever a nullify or poison fails to apply to the attacker due to an immunity, they gain a fury passive, increasing attack by 80% for 6 seconds. So it is a fairly potent fury that does give significant damage boost to some science champions especially. And there are a handful of them that can make a great advantage of that. Again, power snack, when the attacker triggers a buff, it is immediately nullified, defending against 50% of our power. Again, most of the Cosmic champions will kind of suck in this meta. They are borderline playable, but it's not a great time using something like Hulkling, for instance, in most matchups. And then lastly, we have Drip Feed Placebo. The attacker gains a 6-second placebo buff every 10 seconds. Whenever the defender is inflicted with an undamaging debuff, except for stun, reset this timer. There will be some champions that will be able to shut this node down, but for the most part, this is the node that will automatically feed power snack, and if AI refuses to throw a special attack, for instance, they can quite easily get 3 bars of power, and you can kind of be screwed. This meta is definitely, in my experience so far, harder to manage and navigate than the Gladiator Circuit one. Additionally, obviously, we do have science classes clear-cut favorites for this. And then there are some somewhat secret or hidden gems in just about every other class. And we're going to be going over them. Now, first and foremost, we're going to start with, if you do have a fairly reasonably sized Mr. Negative, if you do happen to have a 7-star Mr. Negative, highly advise taking him to rank 2 for this meta, because he can absolutely destroy and nuke just about everyone here, because he's immune to nullify. You'll be triggering his immunity, you're going to be applying the debuffs, and he's just going to be having a great time overall. There are some ridiculous videos out there. Mr. Negative is an absolute monster in this meta, capable of finishing fights without even throwing special attack, really, which is where most of the time his big damage is coming from. A bit altered playstyle, but nonetheless, he's great, crazy good in this meta. So, keep that in mind. Mr. Negative is very, very dangerous. Another champion that's significantly more dangerous than normal is Overseer, as always with these power snack or buffet nodes. He just ramps up much faster, because typically he gains 1 of his gamma charge whenever he crosses the bar of power, or whenever opponents cross the bar of power. But also whenever any of his immunities trigger, he gains a gamma charge. And power snack does trigger that, so he ramps up faster. He's capable of getting that 60% fury as well, and he is much more dangerous and capable than he normally is. Not to mention the fact that he's also a viable defender. Now, because of the power snack, giving him more power, letting him throw more special attacks, he's going to be triggering his auto block more often, he's going to be getting his regen from his level 1s, and it's not a great time in general going up against the guy. Obviously, then we have our regular science MVPs, for instance, Spider-Ham, letting opponents gain some extra power, or, you know, getting those furies, further boosting his damage. He does great. Red Guardian is fantastic. Do not have to worry about power snack at all, ever. Scorpion is doing quite well. Silk has been one of my personal MVPs, an absolute nuke and a rocket. And obviously there are more science champions. Science class in general right now is doing quite crazy. I have seen people do quite impressive things with Luke Cage actually as well. So Luke Cage seems to be doing great in this meta. So is Jessica Jones as well for whatever reasons. And yeah, obviously Titania being buff immune is awesome. And most of the science class really do get shine now. So moving further past Silk, from skill class, arguably the best skill champion right now in this meta is Kate Bishop, and that largely comes down to the fact that she doesn't necessarily gain any buffs, and you keep your opponent in the corner, and then they do end up being more willing to throw more special attacks, and baiting out special attacks or opponent being passive typically isn't a problem with Kate because of that corner mechanic. And yeah, she's works just about as well as you'd hope. And again, in a meta that's filled with science champions, that's great. Then we have Bullseye. Bullseye is significantly more dangerous defender than normal. Again, because typically when you fight against Bullseye, especially if you do not have the ideal counter, you kind of want to minimize the amount of power he gets ever. You want to finish the fight with Bullseye having had the least amount of power, because every time he crosses a bar, he gains that away, and then you end up taking block damage or bleed damage. Then you have to wait out the away, and then you can move on. And now, when you do that, he gets more power faster, and you end up having to deal with significantly more special attacks than normal. So he can be very dangerous in this meta. Then again, Havoc, it's kind of a similar idea. You'd think it's easier to push Havoc to level 2s as a defender, for instance. But with the new AI, Havoc just seems to be throwing the level 1s in opponent's block anyways. And he's been performing very well on defense thus far for me personally, and also reasonably well on attack. We have Mr. Sinister. Again, he's a champion that you kind of want to deal with, baiting out as few special attacks as possible. Because when you throw the level 1s, if he does get to activate them relatively quickly, you're going to get the degen on. And if he throws level 2, you get 100% concussion on, which messes with your abilities. So Mr. Sinister has been quite a gnarly champion to deal with. From mutants, offensively, Sunspot still working very great in this meta because, again, of his perfect block and not gaining any buffs generically outside of dexterity. He seems to be one of the more efficient nukes. So for tech champions specifically, Omega Sentinel has pretty much been my MVP because she's nullify immune. She effectively completely ignores the nodes. She's one of the very few tech champions that's fully nullify immune, and that shows. So I have been using her against, Dominoes and a whole bunch of different champions as well. People kind of sleep and forget about Omega Sentinel just because she isn't as fast as some other tech champions in generic circumstances, but right now she's just about the best the class can do, and she does great. Darkhand Spider-Man works amazingly well in this meta as well, and that's primarily to do with the fact that you spend a significant portion of time ramping up Spidey, but that's really not much of an issue in this meta because when you're going to dex the first time, you're going to trigger Power Snack, and then you just keep on dexing without re-triggering the Dexterity Precision buff, ramp up fully, and then you get to nuke down your opponent, and you also have that heavy attack power control with you, so Starkey works great. Pam also functions very well because number one, he has a ton of power control in his kit, reducing opponent's combat power rate as well as power draining them. And when his glancing armor, nano armor gets nullified, then you just get a passive back instead. So Fam actually has been working phenomenally well, both offensively and defensively. From Cosmic class, the big Cosmic Daddy is just about the only Cosmic Champion, one of the very few Cosmic Champions that functions well. In fact, triggering that immunity helps him ramp up faster, so that is quite nice. As well as getting the placebo buff every X amount of seconds also helps him ramp up slightly faster. So Galan is not only a Cosmic Champion that is completely immune or not inconvenienced by the nodes, he's a Cosmic Champion that actually gets slightly better than he normally would. And that's very, very good for Galan, considering that, there aren't many Cosmic Champs that do well in the meta. Speaking of Cosmic Champions that can do well enough in the meta, one of them is Hercules, because you can entirely control his power gain. You can always trigger the power snack before you would get your true focus or precisions or cruelties. And Hercules is like one of the cosmic champions you can actually get away with using semi-normally in this meta. From the Mystic champions, we obviously have the main guys that you still end up running as defenders and attackers. Sasquatch, for instance, is a great dual-purpose champion. Jager Out is one of those champions that can just kind of seemingly nuke through the power snack, which is super helpful. Obviously, you would need as big Juggernaut as possible. Opponent is still going to gain the power, but the fights are over typically quickly enough for you to be able to kind of like get out of those fights fast enough for him to still be viable. America Chavez is arguably the best Mystic champion for the meta because he most of the time turns that power snack power gain in her favor by reversing the power the opponents are getting. And God, I love Chavez. She's still absolutely destroying this entire meta. And then we have White Tiger, who is immune to Nullify. So that helps her tremendously. Obviously, she functions effectively perfectly normal, as she always would, and is one of the better counters for like Serpents and a bunch of other stuff in this current meta. Now, another champion that I did want to talk specifically in this meta, that a lot of people seem to kind of mix up a few things, because Kabam has, in the last year or so, started this trend of champions being immune to something from champions and not nodes. And that's kind of the case with Red Skull as well. Red Skull is not Nullify immune. Red Skull is immune to Nullify, Fate Seal, and Second effects from champions, not the nodes. So offensively, he will still get all his armor nullified away. I have used him a couple of times on attack, and it's doable. It's just not that easy. So you do need to keep that in mind. Red Skull is not the greatest attacker. He can kind of get away with it. Defense, he still has great. He's not performing that well, though. And there are a whole bunch of tech champions that will still kind of function semi-decently well. But you do need to play smarter or more tactical. Champions like Warlock, for instance, he's still perfectly usable in the meta. You just need to count on the fact that initially his armor up is going to get nullified, opponent's going to get a chunk of power, and then you need to make sure to dex just before power snack, just after power snack comes online and just before you get your armor up. Similar things are happening with champions like Guardian or Idoom, or a bunch of other these tech champions that start the fights with armor ups. They are usable. You just need to be kind of a bit more clever about it. In mutant class, most of the mutants, still will do just about fine, like Dominos, Archangels, like I mentioned before, Havoc. I have been using Bishop somewhat decently as well, because they don't, rely on the buffs too much. They have that passive prowess effect or no buffs at all. And then in skill class again, you still have your regular defenders. As a defender, I wanted to highlight again Killmonger. Killmonger is a very capable defender this meta just because of his extra power gain. Makes in a lot of fights a lot harder to manage his reverb, and opponents end up taking more chunk damage. And the fact that CGR is significantly worse. So somebody like Killmonger and Korg typically do better than normal in this meta as well. Other than that, obviously there will be more champions to shine based on people's own personal experiences and the way the meta shifts and changes. But that is just about the best I can advise you for now with this victory track meta. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about